Good afternoon, everybody. I am Ashley Furr. I am sitting here with Jefferie Ellison. He is the owner of Elite Foundation Repair. Thank you for joining me today. I'm really excited to talk more about the industry. I know on a separate podcast we dove a little bit into, the foundation industry, how you got started. You've obviously been in business for a really long time. So I really just want to dive into kind of the education piece and really just learning how we can help homeowners, how we can help the real estate industry thrive and understand the importance of taking care of your foundation. Okay. So thank you for being here with me. I guess just give me a quick recap of, what the foundation process is like and what your company does.
Okay. Well, if you think you have a foundation problem, the first thing to do is have it looked at. Mm-hmm. Just like anything else, cars messed up, have it looked at. If you have damaged doors are sticking, windows won't open, you got, buckling floors, drywall cracks, those are all indications of foundation movement. And then you need to hire a professional to come in and take a look at it and tell you what's going on with the property.
Okay. It's very simple.
Very simple.
Way simpler than I kind of expected it to be. I think a lot of times you hear people kind of freak out. They're like, oh my gosh, my foundation's in shambles. My house is going to fall down. And then it's just a much bigger problem than it needs to be.
Yeah,
so
it usually is.
Okay. So I'm assuming homeowners just feel a little bit better when they talk to you and they're like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Most of the time, yes. Most of the time homeowners are relieved that when we leave rather than being panicked.
Sure. So talk to me about industry standards. Have they changed over time since you started your company? I know you've been in business for, what'd you say, 20 years?
20 years.
20 years.
Well, I've been doing this 20 years. My company's been in business for 6 years.
6 years.
No, there's nothing new. It's like physics. There's nothing new. Foundation business, there's no new technology. There's no new ways to fix a house. It's all the stuff that we use is very old and very elementary. And I don't foresee anything ever coming up. I've been doing it long enough. I can't think there would be anything else that magically changes in our industry.
Okay. When it comes to, vendors or subcontractors, I'm assuming you have your own in-house people that take care of everything, or do you sub out some work when it comes to repairs?
Both. Now,
Okay.
I have in-house people that we use most of the time, but when we get to busy seasons or when the real estate market is like it is, we don't have time to wait. They're closing in a week. They got to have that thing fixed. So in some cases, I will use an independent contractor, but one of us is always there.
Okay.
So, and a lot of industries use independent contractors. Your plumbers, no one owns a tunneling crew. Someone else is digging that hole. So it's not really much different for us.
Okay. How do you kind of lean on just having reliable contractors? I mean, I know that's a big thing when it comes to being an independent contractor. Everybody just wants the best of the best, and there's tons in the market. Talk to me about, how you select your employees.
Well, the employees or the independent contractors?
Sorry, independent contractors.
That one's to find one. It's difficult. You have to interview them. You have to ask some loaded questions and verify they really know what they're doing. And then our field supervisor on the first several jobs that we do, number 2 in charge of the company is there with them for the entire process to make sure it's all being done the way we want it done. And then once they pass that, then we'll always have a representative there to make sure everything's going fine, but they won't be overseen by the field supervisor.
Okay. So talk about just the foundation process, how you guys assess the damage, start the job, finish the job. I mean, just kind of talk to me about what it's like if I were to work with you.
Yeah, so you give us a call. We go to the house. We draw the outside of the house. You can do it on a CAD or you can do it on a graph paper. It doesn't matter. You're just drawing the outline of the house, and while you're doing that, you're marking any kind of stress signs that would be related to foundation failure. Window joint separations, brick cracks, freeze board separations, expansion joints open. There's not much more than that. That's really all you're looking for. And then you go inside the house and you take a set of elevations. Elevations will just tell you the differentials of elevations. It just tells you how level or unlevel the house is. And then you compare where the elevations change with where the damage is, and then you just work on that one area.
Okay.
So very simple most of the time.
Yeah.
Some houses are tricky, but for the most cases, it's not hard.
What makes a house tricky?
When it was built with a slope and we're trying to figure out where the original slope is, or when the house has been remodeled in a down position, or when something simple, someone decides to put brand new windows in, we have to try to determine where the elevations were when that windows were put in, not the original position of the house. And that can get tricky because we don't want to break the windows when we raise the house. And if the windows were installed in a down position and we try to raise it all the way up, we'll break the windows.
Okay.
And then when we're talking interior piers, they're messy. No one wants a hole inside their house, but can we do the repair without an interior pier, or do we have to put that interior pier in? Or do we elect to do a stabilization only and hope the repair was good enough?
Do you find that when you're doing some of these jobs that say they did remodel, and then unfortunately they had foundation issues, do you find a lot of issues once you're stabilizing and going in and fixing the foundation? Does it cause a lot of problems?
No, at stabilization only, we barely move the house.
Okay.
And I mean barely move the house. It's really when we raise the house is where more damage happens. Obviously, if a house cracks on the way down, it's going to crack on the way back up.
Sure.
And back to your previous question, the hardest tricky house is when someone else has already tried to fix it and screwed up. They overlifted it. Then we have to go in and try to correct what they did in addition to doing more work. If most houses weren't touched by someone else, then the repairs would almost always be easy.
That makes sense. So as a homeowner, what should, say, I look for if I think there's foundation problems? Obviously in Texas, our homes settle between the seasons, and I'm sure some people freak out at cracks, minor cracks.
Right.
So as a homeowner, what should we look out for?
The best thing to do if you're a homeowner in a brick house is ignore the interior and walk the outside of the house.
Okay.
And if you have a house and it falls, you have a little bitty crack in the slab. But as the crack gets taller, it gets much bigger. So you should always be looking high for damage, not low.
Okay.
Look at the expansion joints. If you have the expansion joints, if the expansion joint's open, you have a foundation problem, period, end of story. If the expansion joint's not open, odds of you having a foundation problem is very slim.
Okay.
Outside the expansion joints, you look for the window joint. Everywhere in a brick house where something meets brick, there's a bead of caulk. And that caulk is always going to separate first. Weakest link in the chain breaks first, right? So your caulk lines are going to move first. So if all your caulk lines are set, then the house is okay.
Okay.
If the caulk lines are open, your house is moving.
Interesting.
See how easy it is?
It is, yeah. So when you say expansion joists, you mean like corners, like where different parts of the house meet together?
No, they started these, I think, probably in the late 80s and 90s, but now it's standard procedure. Every 15 to 20 feet, you have to have a built-in joint in the brick, and it's just a straight line.
Okay.
And that's called an expansion joint, where the bricks don't overlap.
Okay.
And people say, you put an expansion joint in so your house can expand and contract. Yes. Another reason is so when the house moves, it doesn't break all the brick, and it opens up the expansion joint. So that's what an expansion joint is. Most houses, almost all houses after, I think, 2005 are required to have them.
Okay.
Before that, some people put them in. The older houses, most older houses don't have expansion joints, but most newer houses do.
Sure. But by then, at that point, most older homes probably have already had their foundation repaired at that, hopefully, by that point.
By that point, most of your older homes, it's usually one side, then we may have to fix the other side. I'd say that's probably not even true. The facts are most of the repairs that a house has had before that's having problems again is exactly where it was fixed previously.
Okay.
And that's all just because it wasn't done good enough.
Okay. So for like real estate agents that are going to sell a home or are working with an inspector for their, new home buyers or just buyers in general, what are some tips that you would give them during that process?
It's a lot easier if it's a brick home because you can walk the outside of a brick home, look at your joint lines. You can look at cracks, and we look for cracks, but the joints are always going to open up first, so it's easier to look at them.
Okay.
walk the perimeter of the house. Always look up. And we teach that. Look high, don't look low. Everybody wants to find the crack in the slab. That means absolutely nothing. Cracks in higher means the house is actually shifting. So always look high. Look for the joints and freeze board, the crown molding on the outside of the house. Look and see if that's separated. If that's separated, go to the nearest joint. If that's open, there's a problem. If that other joint's not open, it's probably just a warped piece of wood. Once you walk the outside, you already have a general idea of where the house is moving. Then you go inside and you start looking at drywall, crooked doors that don't work. People always want to talk about swinging doors, ghost doors. That's what are Casper doors. They just move automatically. Yeah, that doesn't really tell you a story.
Okay.
People think it does. No, it's usually the hinges.
Right.
Or the door was hung a little bit wrong.
Right.
Look for the cracks above the door. Vertical cracks in a house mean absolutely nothing. Diagonal cracks mean differential movement. That means we're going to put some piers in. And if you have a horizontal crack, not a big deal. If you have a lot of horizontal cracks, you probably have a plumbing leak or a drainage problem.
Interesting.
Now, there was an agent one time said, well, I have this crack, and then I have this crack, and it's all in the same thing. Okay, that's a diagonal crack. It just did this. Stair-stepped on the inside of the house.
Oh, man. So you keep talking about brick homes. So other types of homes are siding or?
Siding.
Okay.
Yeah. So siding homes, you just can't look at the outside of the house.
Okay.
So the outside of a house is going to tell you more faster than the interior of a house was. You can't cover up damage on the outside of a house as well as you can the interior.
Right.
You can hide interior damage very well with a good painter. Now, you can paint the brick, and that gets a little tricky. But if you want to fill in the window joint, you can see that the window joint at the top looks like this, and the window joint down here looks like this. You can tell someone caulked that in. You can also touch the caulk. If the caulk is hard, then it's old. If it's very flexible, it's new, and that would tell you a story too. So the outside of the house just tells you the damage easier than the interior.
Yeah.
So siding homes, the outside of the house means nothing.
Yeah.
So then you have to pay attention to the elevations and the damage on the interior of the house.
That's interesting. You talked about, or you gave me a scenario in the last podcast, but a home we were renting, it's a 2-story, and it was brand new. I mean, it was maybe a couple years old, but we had a homeowner, the landlords were selling it. So we were moving out, and there was a large crack where the corners met upstairs. And I mean, sure, it was a long crack, but it wasn't anything funky. Like it literally was just settling. And the homeowners freaked out because they assumed there was a lot of foundation problems and just walked. Like they didn't want to buy the house after that, which I'm not. Obviously, you've taught me a lot just in this moment about foundation, but even looking at it, I know you said it's not rocket science, but I'm like, I don't know what they're seeing. Like that's clearly settling from where the corners meet, but.
People look at foundation, especially in the transaction business, and it's always uneducated people, and uneducated agents allow them to get away with it.
Yeah.
They think foundation is the black flag on the house. When we fix the foundation, it is literally stronger than the day it was built. Literally, it is better than the day it was built after we fix it.
I believe that.
It's just got added support. All a pier is a stilt to a more stable environment. So I'm going to take this concrete slab and I'm going to put a better foundation underneath it. That's all we're doing. So they're always stronger than the day they were built.
Yeah. Are there ways that homeowners can prevent foundation problems from occurring, especially since it does get so hot here?
Yes and no. I would say no. If your house is going to have a foundation problem, it's going to have a foundation problem. There's nothing you can do to stop it. My analogy on that is marathon runners still die of heart attacks. How is that possible? They eat perfect, they run all the time, and they still have heart attacks. Watering your foundation, yes, is a good thing, and you should water your foundation. What you're really doing is you're soaking the moisture or the dirt around the house with moisture so it becomes expanded and becomes stable. But you're also creating a moisture barrier underneath the house, creating a moisture barrier so the water underneath the house can't evaporate. So if you could have consistent soil year round, we wouldn't have near as many foundation problems as we have. But in Texas, you've seen the soil. You can have perfectly good soil, then you can have a crack that big that's 22 foot deep.
Yeah.
So watering your foundation is great. Always making sure enough dirt's up against the foundation. people always say you got to have the dirt's got to be 3 inches below the brick line. No, that's not true, because sometimes it's designed not to be that way. You never want to see the bottom of the form board. So the smooth part of your slab, we call it the grade beam, they call it the slab. It's real smooth, and all of a sudden it starts getting really rough. You never want to see the rough part. Make sure enough dirt's up against that, and then water is as much. Get a good watering program. How much do I water? That depends. The west side of the house needs more than the east side. So.
But what happens when, even though we've had so much rain this season, it's starting to get a little dry, but you're only allowed to water 2 times a week?
You're allowed to water your foundation even in a water shortage.
Okay.
As long as you have a designated watering system. So if you use soaker hoses from a spigot, you're allowed to use that, even though we're in a water shortage.
Okay.
And then if you have a drip system, that would be on a separate zone. And then you would have, if they came and wanted to fine you, you would have to prove that it's on a separate zone, but you're allowed to protect your house.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I was curious about. So say for, I know you said new home builders obviously don't necessarily call you guys, but a lot of new home builds, they're not letting the slabs sit long enough necessarily. Have you seen any issues with new homes being built having foundation issues?
Well, yes and no. The average home that is fixed for foundation repair is going to be 15 to 30 years old.
Okay.
Before 15 years, the concrete's strong enough to hold itself in place when the soil shrinks and creates a void space, but it's strong enough to hold itself there. Then after 30 years, that house has seen every situation that it possibly could. So if it hadn't moved by then, generally we're not going to do a lot of work on that house.
Okay.
So it's 15 to 30 years. So builders not. The problem with foundations today is the builders are building quickly, yes, but they're not letting the foundation, and I don't mean the concrete, I mean the dirt.
The dirt.
They don't let it pack down and settle before they pour the slabs. Now, pouring the concrete too fast when it's too hot or too cold or too wet, that's going to be a concrete problem, but not necessarily cause a foundation failure.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It doesn't mean the concrete's going to fall down. It's just going to start flecking off and being, if you brush it, you might get some concrete off of it.
Sure. No, that's all of this is educational, because I'm telling you, I think just a lot of people just don't know, or take the time to ask questions. They're just scared. I think people just see dollar signs of, is this going to cost me more than what I've already spent, or.
Well, the problem with that is the industry don't help.
Yeah.
Most of us, we're just there for the dollar. Whatever, the more information I can use to scare you, the more money I can have you spend on it.
Yeah.
And it's just not right.
It's just not right. No, not at all. I think just being educated about our seasons here is really the main key in protecting your property too. What would you say is an unpopular opinion that you have about your industry?
I think what people think the average cost is. So the horror stories that people hear about foundation repairs, that's maybe 1 out of 100. The other 99 that went as planned, no one talks about it. If you have a flat tire on your car, you just fix your flat tire and you move on. But if you have a blowout on, tollway, you're going to tell everybody about it because it was exciting. So if you take the same logic, people would be scared to death of any flat tire.
Yeah.
When most of the time it's not a big deal. That's the biggest problem that I have is it's really the ignorance of people, not stupidity. There's a difference. People not having the true information on what we actually do.
Yeah.
And the scare tactics that we have put in there with them. That's my biggest problem or beef with our industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And you said you do like to teach classes. So what are you teaching on, and who do you teach to?
I teach CE credits,
Okay.
continuing education credits for real estate agents. So I go in classes and educate them, and they can get a 1 hour CE class, and I have 2 different classes we teach.
Okay.
So it's educating them, and a lot of what we're talking about is what I talk about. And I mean, I show them pictures of what to look for. I show them pictures of how to read engineers' reports. Because you see a diagram, it looks like a hieroglyphics.
Yeah.
You have no idea what that means. And then I just start breaking it down. And oh, that's all that means. Okay, cool. It's easy.
Yeah.
Because it's just numbers. It's not hard. But a lot of it is just I just call the truth of foundation. And it's fun because they come up to me after, I just never knew that. I never knew it was that simple.
Yeah.
So
how long does it typically take you guys to come out to the job, fix the foundation, and move on?
An average job is usually about a day.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So that's another people think, is this going to take 2 or 3 weeks? I said, no, it's like a 2 or 3 hour.
Yeah.
So an average job today is 12 to 15 piers. We can complete that in a day. Now, a lot of that depends on the digging. If we're jackhammering rock to put a pier in, why do you have foundation problems? But when if you're in clay soil, sometimes that ground is hard as a rock, and you can't dig it with a shovel. You actually have to use a jackhammer to dig through dirt. And then the depth of the pier.
Okay.
So when you drive a pier down, well, how far do you drive your pier? You drive it to refusal or load-bearing strata. So you're using the weight of the house as leverage to drive a pier in the ground. And eventually that pier is going to stop. And then the house will start coming up off of the pier. And that is the load-bearing strata or point of refusal. Now, the average depth throughout the entire metroplex is probably about 10 feet. But there are some cases we've gone 60 feet. Well, a 60-foot pier takes a lot longer than a 10-foot pier. So if it's 15 piers at 60 feet, that might take 3 days.
Yeah.
When I can do that same job in 1 day in Collin County.
Yeah. Wow. I didn't realize he went down that far.
Some of them. Our record is 72. The deepest I've ever heard of or seen firsthand was 72 feet.
Where was that? Is that in the city?
That was a very small pocket of an area that we've never gone that deep in Coppell.
Oh, okay. Wow.
We did a commercial building backed up right to the Trinity River in Dallas, and we went 66 feet.
Oh, okay.
But the average depth is not that deep.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's easier? Is it just true pier and beam homes that already kind of set up to fix because you kind of have a crawl space? Yeah, those are easier.
No, I hate to answer every question. It depends.
Yeah.
So if you let's do a cost thing. If you took the average cost of a slab versus a pier and beam, the average cost of pier and beam is going to cost more.
Sure.
If you take the low end, a slab's going to be less. If you take the high end, a slab's going to be more. The thought of pier and beams is you just go underneath the house and you just reset the house. Well, a lot of pier and beams, the term pier and beam means it has a perimeter grade beam. So you treat the perimeter just like you would a slab. So I have to pier the outside just like I do a slab. So if I'm doing 10 piers on a slab, I lift the slab and I'm done. If I do 10 piers on a pier and beam, I lift the pier and beam, but now I've got to go underneath the house and reset it. And you're doing that on your belly, carrying jacks and carrying pads, and now you're having to reset the house.
Yep.
Also, anything wrong with the understructure, I have to repair. So if you got rotten wood, I got to fix that also. So it takes more time, a little more effort to fix a pier and beam than it does a slab house.
Yeah.
And then you have your block and base homes, pier and beam that are classified as block and base. They don't have a perimeter grade beam. If everything underneath that house is correct, let's call it code, then I can fix one of those in 3-4 hours and we're done. Those are usually not that big a deal. And that's where the misconception of a pier and beam is cheaper than a slab.
Well, I've also heard, rumors, talk, whatever you want to call it, that if you live in a pier and beam home, you're having to fix your foundation a little more often than you would like a true foundational slab.
That is true.
Yeah.
Again, basically there's 2 different types of pier and beams. If it's a block and base, which means you can tear off the side and crawl from one side to the other, no brick house, no perimeter grade beam, you're going to have to reset those every 5 to 7 years. It doesn't cost as much as your initial reset because everything's already been completed. All you got to do is make some adjustments.
Okay.
And you can be in and out fairly quickly. It doesn't cost as much. A pier and beam, the perimeter should always remain stable. You should never have to adjust the perimeter once you put piers in, but you still have to adjust the inside, but that could be 10 to 15 years because if the perimeter is stable, the interior generally is not going to move.
Okay. Wow. That's great advice. So what is next for your company? Do you have any short-term, long-term goals? Are you trying to branch out a little bit?
No, we're going to stay here. I came from the largest foundation company in the Metroplex, and I just never want to be that big. Every homeowner has the ability to talk to me. I call homeowners. we're already past the point of me being able to visit every single job. But, you know, I like going to the jobs and shaking hands with the homeowner. You know, I think you should meet the homeowner if you're spending $5,000-$10,000 on a job.
Yep.
And we already can't do that. We're already past that point. But I would like to be just a little bit bigger, a little more established, a little more consistent so the seasons don't affect us as much. But I'm almost as big as I want to be, but just a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
And just do good work. I don't know what I'm going to do or how I'm going to stop the business once I get to that point. We're going to figure it. That'd be a good problem to have.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we've already branched off and we started a plumbing company.
Okay.
Foundation and plumbing go hand in hand because
Yeah.
when you raise a foundation, you're going to break some plumbing sometimes. And I got tired of some of the costs I was hearing. So I said, you know, I can fix this. Let me call a buddy of mine who happens to be a plumber. And he told me how to do it. And I said, okay, where do I do this? And he said, you know what? I'll do this. So then we just teamed up together and started a plumbing company. So now I have a plumbing company too.
That's great.
So I will probably end up doing something else. I have some plans. Don't want to make an announcement
Yeah.
yet, but I have some ideas of my third venture.
Okay.
But I'm only going to do it as long as I can, and I don't mean control it, as long as I can go into it with the same mindset I have now. Do good work, make some money, but we don't have to be rich off of it, and just do good by people. If
Yeah.
I can control that part of it, then I'll do something else.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you coming on. This was really, really great information. So I'm excited to get this out to the public.
Awesome.
But thank you. I appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am.